The Paul Leslie Interviews.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's our great pleasure to welcome our special guest, Randy Edelman. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Who is Randy Edelman?
He is a guy from New Jersey who started fooling around with a piano when he was very young and just kind of took it from there and always enjoyed doing that and started writing music when I was pretty young and just continued on without any particular road in front of me that I knew I was going on and just kind of progressed as a musician kind of through the different phases that I have traveled on.
So take us back. What was life like growing up in New Jersey?
Just pretty much normal. Like I loved playing sports and doing the kind of things that everybody else was doing. I didn't really draw any attention to this kind of interest I had in music till a little later, though I was doing it and taking lessons and basically kind of having a traditional background playing classical music. That at the time wasn't really considered, that wasn't that hip, so I just wanted to be just sort of like everybody else until I discovered, when I was about 11 or 12 or maybe 13 that playing piano at parties was a good way to get good-looking women.
What about your parents? Did they play a lot of music around the house?
No, they weren't musicians. They played music, but no more than anybody else. A lot of show music. If they would go into New York, they would maybe bring back the Cast album or something like that. But not they weren't particularly musical.
How did they feel about you playing music?
Well, they were supportive, but they were certainly not in any way thinking that I was going to do this, or I didn't show any kind of ability to like other kids may have been in bands and things like that. I was pretty much and have continued to be sort of except when I'm scoring films or doing other things that I utilize. Lots of musicians playing my orchestrations or my scores. I'm pretty much a soloistic musician. I've never been in a group or anything like that. So I didn't kind of show an ability to do that. So they were like scared that I wouldn't be able to. I mean, except for teaching music, they certainly couldn't see me doing anything else. And of course, I had other ideas.
How did you come to perform piano as part of the Broadway shows?
When I got out of school, I was kind of playing piano for a lot of singers, accompanying them and doing arrangements and stuff like that. And I just auditioned to play in a pit band of a Broadway show, and that's kind of how I started doing that. And that was great. All that stuff was a great experience. I didn't do it for that long because then I kind of left New York. And that was kind of the time that, all this kind of singer-songwriter stuff was happening. And I was kind of listening to that and getting into, when I was on the road conducting for singers and things, I had a lot of time. So I started writing my own songs, which I had never planned to do. It's just that I kind of fell into doing that, and at that time, if you could, in the mid-70s, if you could carry a tune, you could get a record deal, so that's what happened.
Well, speaking of record deal, tell us about the experience of recording your first album.
It was so funny, I hadn't had any experience, or a lot of years at all, in recording. So since I had such a pretty full musical background, especially compared to the other people that were doing that kind of thing, I was so ready to do the album. I didn't know you go in and you cut tracks and you screw around with the tracks and then you make changes and you didn't overdub vocals and stuff like that. So I was so ready to do it. I literally recorded my first album in like a week. Because I had done all the arrangements and written everything down, and I was singing and playing just about everything and also producing it myself and doing the arrangements. So I did it a little quicker than you should, but it was a very small budget and a small label at the time. So I just, I did it pretty quickly, but it was it was exciting. I mean, I was a young kid and didn't know, where I was going or exactly what I was doing, but this was a little different than already my path kind of changed from being more or less of a musical arranger, then suddenly I was becoming an artist, without too much thought about it, just kind of winging it. I liked writing songs and went through a couple of personal things that kind of led me into writing lyrics.
Speaking of lyrics, I wanted to ask you about one of your early songs, Weekend in New England.
Yeah, and that was, that wasn't exactly at that time, but that was kind of, that was a song that kind of evolved. It's funny that is the one that people know from that time, and it's really lasted because of Barry's continued popularity. Weekend in New England was just kind of thinking back, kind of a reminiscence to someone who I used to go and visit up in Summerstock in Maine. And it's just kind of a song that was written in kind of retrospectively a couple of years later, just thinking about that experience. But it went through a lot of changes because the original version I did on my album, I actually changed for Barry, and it was kind of like more of a jazz thing, and that's the version that he recorded. The version that it's not that he changed it, I changed it for him, but it kind of musically is different than the original version that I did. So it's kind of interesting that a song that kind of went through different changes as opposed to songs that you write and you say, oh, this is really a good one, and you put it aside and it just stays the way you wrote it. A lot of people have written their best songs or something really quickly. And this song kind of evolved musically and lyrically and then into a different version for someone else to record, not knowing that was going to be, something that people were it was just going to hang around for a long time,
We're talking with songwriter Randy Edelman. What brought you out to Los Angeles?
I came out early. I mean, I was very early after my first album. I came out here because I was conducting for people in Las Vegas, and my first album, which very few people heard, was heard by a group at that time that were really big called the Carpenters. And they not only recorded a couple of songs, but took me on tour as their opening act. It was kind of strange because I had never sung in front of, three people or even, my mother. And suddenly I was kind of thrown out in front of thousands of people. I mean, they were playing big, field houses and with big college tours and stuff. And so I had to kind of get my feet wet quick. That was when I came out to California, and it was kind of an odd thing because I would go from opening for them to the very next night opening for Frank Zappa, and of course doing the same thing because I didn't have anything else to do because I had never done it before. So that was a completely, you can imagine the experience of playing, 15 unknown songs in front of the Carpenters, in front of a kind of polite audience at, let's say, Brigham Young University, and then going to like the Phoenix Celebrity Theater with a revolving stage with Frank Zappa the next night, and having people, screaming and yelling at you to get the hell off the stage,
Do you think that those were good experiences?
Oh, yeah, they were great. They were all great, yeah. I have a good sense of humor, so... Yeah. Oh, yeah. And since this was not anything that I had planned, this singing and songwriting thing, it wasn't like I took it seriously in the writing of the songs. That's what I cared about. But as far as me going out there and doing it, I didn't take it that seriously.
How did you get interested in film scores?
Well, when I came out, there's a lot of stuff that was going on at the time. When I came out to California, I remember I was on a label that was distributed by MGM, and they took me to just to take some like publicity pictures or something at the old MGM lot, which is now the Sony lot, doesn't exist anymore, but I mean, it exists, but it's a different company. But I remember going to a scoring section and being, I think it was Elmer Bernstein or somebody like that, somebody, great. And I was intrigued. I wasn't as intrigued as, it wasn't about the music particularly as how the music was matching perfectly the picture. And in those days, there were no computers, so there was a different method that was used, and that really intrigued me. So I decided to actually study with somebody to learn the method of doing that, which is a lot of mathematics. So it may sound strange. Of course, I knew lots of film scores and appreciated them, but it was that that kind of mathematical way of the picture matching the music that really intrigued me. So I learned that and did some early TV movies and stuff, but it wasn't until years and years later when I started doing it pretty exclusively, after I had done a lot of concerts and a lot of albums, and especially had a lot of success in England with my own stuff, which is where that happened. And then gradually, when I would come back here, I was doing a lot of scoring things. But the first kind of big picture that I did was a picture called Twins with Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito, and that was after years of doing a million other things, and that sort of started me getting into a lot of scoring and doing a lot of comedies, and then I tried to get away from that and do more serious historical things like Gettysburg and Last of the Mohicans and Dragonheart and stuff like that. So, but that's when it started. I mean, really years after I had done lots of things musically, both as a performer, as a producer, and as an arranger.
So to go from recording the traditional song to scoring films, was that a difficult transition?
Oh, that's a completely, most people can't do. You have to have your kind of musical chops and your background together to do the scoring thing. The scoring thing, when I say it has absolutely nothing to do with the song thing, it doesn't. However, there were many musical things that I had done as a producer and an arranger and as a pianist that helped me doing scores, especially contemporary scores, things like Twins or like My Cousin Vinny or lots of the Mask, the original Mask I did with Jim Carrey, which needed contemporary kind of hip stuff where you don't have a lot of time. It's not like making a record where you can just sit in the studio for a month getting a drum sound. So all that stuff of making records, that was helpful there. In other things, you have to have your kind of musical background in styles, whether you're writing a period piece that takes place in the 1800s or a futuristic piece, and you have to have a really good knowledge of kind of 20th century atonal music to create atmosphere and tension and suspense. So it all comes into play. But the songwriting and the scoring thing per se, they're two different crafts, and they don't really meet.
How important is the score to the experience of watching a film, in your opinion?
Oh, it's very important. I mean, it's just important where there is music in a film and what it is as when there's silence in a film. I mean, it's got to be the right style. It's got to be the right tone. It shouldn't overpower the drama or the characters that are on the screen. It's really important, but in a way, it's always said you shouldn't notice it, but it's really important. Just try to listen to any kind of, really any film, not just a dramatic film, but anything, whether it's suspense or drama or romance or a romantic comedy without the music. I'm not talking about the songs now. I'm talking about the score, and you'll see how pretty quickly how important the music is. It's real important. And, unfortunately, when you score a film, the composer is the last person kind of into a film, and usually you don't ever have enough time. You could spend a year on all these movies, and it wouldn't be enough time. So you have to be right, and you have to be fast. So either one of those alone, being right and being too slow, doesn't work, and being wrong and being fast doesn't work. So you've got to be, when I say right, you've got to be right in the sound of the music and the ambience and the style and the pacing of it, and you've got to do it pretty quickly because you're under a lot of pressure.
So when somebody contacts you and they say, I want you to do the score for this film, how does the process begin?
It really begins when you get a cut of a movie. It used to be years and years ago. I mean, I don't know exactly how it works, but the composer always got an edited, what's called a final cut of the film, and then the composer had like 2 or 3 months, and they go in and do the music. It no longer works like that. There's never a final cut. I still don't know how they do it, but a week before it goes into 3,000 theaters, if you're doing a big mainline studio film, they're still cutting away. And of course, with special effects, a lot of times I write things that are not even on the screen. There's just markings of what it's going to be. For instance, when I just did The Mummy 3 a couple of years ago, or Triple X or stuff like that, there were a lot of special effects that aren't final till after I'm done. So they'll say there's an avalanche or a snowstorm or something, and you get certain shots, but you don't get the exact shots and see what it's going to be. So, but to answer your question, you start with a cut of the film that's as close as they have to whatever the final version is going to be, and then you work with a director, and there's usually what they call a temp score, which they've used for previews that they've had. You just kind of work with the director from that and just go.
Which film have you been the most excited to score?
You know what? There's been really a lot of them, and a lot of different genres. I don't really have one. They're all different, and they're all like, they all have their own background and histories and their own difficulties. So when you can solve, because they're like, it's like putting together a puzzle doing a film score. And when you solve a problem or you make a scene work for a director, it's always a good feeling. And sometimes some of the ones that you like the most are not necessarily the ones that people know or the ones that people are successful in the theaters. I mean, there were a couple of films. There was a remake of the old horror film Diabolique that I did years ago that people the original French film didn't even have any music in it. In the end, somebody is like murdered in a bathtub. But I really loved the score to that. And then you'll do a light film like While You Were Sleeping was a film that I really liked doing that score. And the score is just, as much of a romantic comedy as anything else, but there was a certain difficulty in doing it, and in the end, we came up with something that everybody was happy with. And so a lot of times when you say, what was your favorite film to work on, there's the story and the history of these. All these films have histories. Some of them are like, even though they may not seem complicated, they're films that have been around for 15 years as scripts, going through one star or another star, or one studio puts it in turnaround, and they all have their own histories, and that may be, by the way, the silliest film or the most dramatic film. It doesn't matter. They just have their own stories and people that have been involved. So when a composer comes in and you literally have weeks or a couple of months at the most, you're becoming part of, kind of a story that's existed for some of these people, including maybe a novelist who wrote a book years ago and has been involved with it. And, you're just part of a whole history. And usually, you like, I did a film last year called Leap Year that took place in Ireland with an actress I like called Amy Adams. And wasn't a film a lot of people saw, but we worked on it really hard to make that whole Irish feeling of it, because it takes place all over there. And you kind of, the ones that are closest to you in proximity is working on them, you kind of feel closest to those.
In terms of music in movies, I think one movie that many people say that the music is just incredible from beginning to end would be Last of the Mohicans. And you had a hand in that.
Right, yeah. That was one of these, people asking about that, because that was one of those situations, Paul, that was one of the quickest, and with a very difficult director, Michael Mann, who's known for being very tough, quickest and nicest, and when I say easy, I don't mean easy in terms of it was hard work, but it was a situation, and I'm not sure where you're going with this, but I've spent so much time when people ask me about it. There was a score that existed, then they were having a lot of problems with the music, with the movie, and a lot of problems in the previews with it because it wasn't really a commercial picture. And Daniel Day-Lewis, who was the star, who's, of course, a great actor, had never been in any picture that was, quote, commercial. And so there was a problem, and they blamed a lot of reasons, and one of the things they blamed was the score. So I was brought in a difficult situation, and I wrote about half the music and suggested to them that they keep what they already had because I thought it could work together. And I had very little time, and that seemed to be the right thing. And then I also suggested to them, if you believe this, there was no plans on that movie. It was such a mess, and it really wasn't. It was just that it was just a different kind of movie. And if you know it, you know how wonderful it is. There was no plan to have a soundtrack album. So I said, listen, you got to have you got to have an album to this. No. And then finally I said, listen, I'm going in and I'll put everything together. And because there was a question about who did what, I mean, there were two composers on it, I made sure that they called me and said, oh, you can't put it together the way you did it because it needs to be in sequence of the film. And I said, no, not in this situation. I think people are going to want to know who did what. So I'm putting my half on, and then Trevor Jones is the other composer, his half on, and I'm really glad I did that because the album went on to be like a triple platinum album, which is unheard of for a soundtrack, for a picture like that. Even though it was an odd situation in which I had to go to the Golden Globes, which we were nominated for, and he went to the British Academy Award. But it was just one of those things that worked out, and I thought that in a difficult situation, I came in and did what I had to do and was, fair about it. And the outcome of it was a huge success in something that you would seem, if I laid out the circumstances, you would think is disastrous, but it wasn't.
Tell us about one of the pieces from Last of the Mohicans, chorus theme.
Chorus theme. Well, that's a piece of mine that's my favorite. The reason that I like it is because if you've seen the film and you know the violence and the way a lot of the stuff was shot, the reason I like that cut, and I do that a lot. I just was in Europe, and I do it a lot in concerts where they have a lot of film music festivals, is because that's a scene that takes place in a garden with Madeline Stowe, who is the lead actress, and it's right before the soldiers are attacked in a horrific, violent, unbelievable way, and very graphic and very bloody. But the music to that scene is very lyrical and almost like a classical chamber music piece. And what it does, and why I always like the piece, but I also point people to it, is it's a way that the composer is in a way, can work in a certain way where you're setting such a peaceful scene up, but the reason that the music is like that is because you're getting ready for a scene that doesn't have any music, that is just sound effects and tomahawks flying and people, just getting really torn apart in that battle. And that piece works to almost set you up for that, and in doing so makes the next scene more intense than it would have been without not only the scene before it, but that music that's almost like a minuet or something at that time period. I forgot exactly what year it was in the 1800s, but that's one of the reasons that I like the piece, and the theme has become very well known.
We're talking to songwriter and recording artist Randy Edelman. I wanted to work our way over to your album, The Pacific Flow to Abbey Road.
Yes. Well, that was a long time coming. I mean, it was almost over 20 years that I've been scoring and doing almost 100 scores or something, that I really haven't thought about writing songs. So this was something last year I just felt like taking a break, and all of a sudden I just started writing songs and got away from the scoring, and I kind of went down the road from where I'm sitting right now and to the ocean, and stuck a coffee pot and a piano in a really nice place overlooking the ocean, and just wrote just about all those songs. And then I had recorded a lot of recent scores: 27 Dresses, Leap Year, Mummy 3, Shanghai Noon, and Shanghai Nights with Jackie Chan. I had done all of those at Abbey Road in London with a great orchestra there. And I also loved the room there, the big room, and I always loved sitting late at night playing piano in that huge room when the orchestra left. So I kind of always had that in my mind, and I just thought, you know what, this is a good idea, especially on a lot of the personal songs, to go over there. So I wrote the songs here, and I went over to England and recorded most of it at Abbey Road, hence, obviously, the title.
I'm sure recording at Abbey Road was surreal.
Oh, yeah, no, it was great. But like I said, I've been doing it quite a lot before this and always wanted to go over there and do some songs there. So when this kind of mood struck me, quite a lot of songs. I mean, this isn't like during all those years that I wasn't writing songs. I was writing songs and I stockpiled them. This was basically all done written in the last year, and then, the last few months went over and recorded them there.
Could you pick a favorite song from the Pacific Flow to Abbey Road?
I love a song called Don't Forsake Me Now, which is has a certain piano style that I like. And I also like there's an instrumental called Waiting that closes the album that I like. It's very simple. I mean, both of these are very pianistic, whereas things like Walking in the Streets of London and If I Could Do That and Miracle in New Orleans have little more instrumentation. Basically, the album is very personal.
Tell us about the first song on the album, If I Could Do That.
Well, that's a very personal song, and it's a romantic song, and it's like, if I could do that, basically it means I could go out and have things be a different way, which happens to a lot of people that may have not worked out the way you thought it would. Without getting into it more, that song's been, the idea of that has been written lots of different ways. I don't think particularly like that, but that's sort of the way I put it.
We're talking with songwriter and recording artist Randy Edelman. One of the other songs you mentioned was Walkin' on the Streets of London.
Yeah, I wrote that one. I didn't. I shouldn't say that. No, I did write it here, but I finished it when I was actually in London last year scoring something, and it was just like that's sort of a song about. I was actually having a lot of trouble in my room. It's not as good as hooking up my computer and my phones and everything, and just everybody was walking around. So the song. It's about, though there's a lot of changes going on, it was the constant people when I was looking at my window just up and down the streets at all hours, rain or shine, while I was trying to do my thing, and it's just kind of, I like the way it came out, but it's really pretty much obvious if you listen to the lyrics. It's just really about what it is, and no matter what's going on, they're going to be walking up and down the streets of London for a long time.
Another song you mentioned from your album, The Pacific Flow to Abbey Road, Miracle in New Orleans. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, that was a piece that I read an article in the paper about somebody, and I never got really exactly what or who it was, but there was a child that was saved during the storm there, and I didn't get too much detail, but the idea kind of was rolling around in my mind. That's why when I said I wrote these songs, I had a bunch of ideas, lyrical ideas that I kind of liked, and that made it that really pushed me towards turning them into songs, and that was one about it's about a real experience that somebody had. But like I said, I got the idea from an article that I read. But I was actually on my way back from a rap awards, or a few years ago. A rapper named Nelly took a song of mine that had been done by Patti LaBelle called "Isn't It a Shame" and turned it into a big rap hit called "My Place." So I went to Miami as to get my rap award for that song, and on the way back is when that storm was happening. So that's when I remember reading about it.
We're talking with recording artist and songwriter Randy Edelman. The album closes with "Waiting." Tell us about that closing piece.
You know what? That is, I write a lot of times. I don't write instrumental things usually. Usually when I do, they're for specific things and for films. And usually when I'm thinking about writing songs, I won't. But that had a particular. That was almost like a score without a film. I mean, a theme without a film is really what I want to say. And I went in England with a cellist, and she played this beautiful part I had written for her, and it just seemed to be, that's really sort of, that thing is really, if I could do nothing else and I could just write stuff like that, I would do it. Because without a film, without a song, without anything, I just really enjoy doing that, and the mood of that seemed right. There was kind of no place else to put it except at the end. I almost called it "Waiting for Frederick" because it has a kind of Chopinistic feeling to it, but I didn't. I just called it "Waiting." And I'll leave that up to the listener to think if you're waiting for, is it a romantic thing, or, waiting for Frederick would make it a little different. So I just decided to leave the Frederick out and the for and just make it "Waiting."
Do you envision recording another album like this?
Let's put it this way. I'm not going to say that I won't. It's just, you have to really create a space for it. And I just got back. I was in England. I actually did, if you believe, I did a club there for 3 nights, which I haven't done anything like that in years, just with the piano. It was a really cool place called the Pheasantry that Eric Clapton actually used to not only live in this place, it's off the King's Road in London, but actually he had a studio and stored his guitars, so they've turned it into like more of a club. It's really nice. I did a lot of promotion stuff there. I'm sure I will. I would have said a few years ago, before I did this one, because I was so involved. In scoring, your task is to make the director's vision in a scene, whatever it is, kind of come to life when the director feels and the film needs music to enhance it. And that's really what your thing is. It's certainly not to write a song. Well, just about all directors I work with have no idea of my background as a songwriter. I've actually been accused of being my own son. That's it, yeah. That's almost too long a story to get into, but it's like, is the kid that went to Australia with these songs that were popular in England in the late 70s, they just can't imagine. Some people just can't, they just can't imagine you do something totally different. But I know when I went and did the Olympics there in like 2000, they were surprised that I was the same person who had been there, 20 years before that doing these songs. But to answer your question, I probably will. I'm not sure if it will be personal like this, or more produced, or less produced, or just piano pieces. I'm not sure. But it's a much different art form than scoring films. Scoring films has its own craft to it, and obviously songwriting does too. But they all work together, but they're also very kind of individualistic kind of things.
When someone listens to your music, what do you hope they get from the experience of listening?
Well, you know what? I hope they get what it is that I was, the emotion of it that I was trying to put across, be it romance, be it suspense, be it, I hope that that they get the heart of it, and the heart of it is the emotion, and that may be conveyed by melody or by just a sound or by an orchestration or the sound of a particular instrument. But I just hope they get the emotion of a particular piece. And that's the same thing with and that's the same thing with the song. Song is different because you're kind of pointing them. You're more, well, I shouldn't say it's more. In a movie, you have a scene and music that goes along with it, and you hope that they get the emotion, that the music adds to the emotion. In a song, obviously there's no visual, but you have a melody and lyrics that's pointing them in a certain direction, and I just hope that they're moved by the experience of listening to what I've created, what any composer has created, and that's, I think, the ultimate goal. And just and for it to be uniquely yours as opposed to something else that they think they've heard.
Through the years, what musicians have continued to inspire you?
Well, you'd have to. There's so many musicians in so many genres. Classical musicians. I think I've been influenced by all. Retrospectively, I've been influenced by lots of different musicians in lots of different genres. I mean, there are many people in pop music who I love, and many people in classical music, and many people in the theatrical world in music. I mean, I certainly can't point to one. I mean, you could say that in the theater you're influenced by everybody from, Rodgers and Hammerstein to Leonard Bernstein, and classical music starts from way back, whether it's Bach or Beethoven and then up to Mahler and Stravinsky and Rachmaninoff, and then you get into the pop world, and it's everybody from Lieber and Stoller to the Beatles and to great blues performers. I mean, with me, I've been influenced by everybody. Then you have people like Bacharach, Burt Bacharach, and Hal David, who have written such interesting original tunes. So, I mean, everybody has influenced me, that's for sure.
What is the best thing about being Randy Edelman?
The fact that I'm going to be getting off the phone with you soon. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, you got to. No, what is the best thing? The best thing is just, you know what? I'm very fortunate that I have been able to sit here, behind my piano and be able to pull the wool over everybody's eyes and make a living doing this my whole life and never have a job doing anything else. And just being able to, I feel it's a privilege and an honor to be able to be an artist and go through your life writing, creating original music. And that's really that's sort of something that I've been very, very fortunate to be able to do.
Now for my last question. For anyone listening in, wherever, whenever, do you have any parting words of wisdom for our listeners?
Parting words of wisdom. Let's put it this way. In the immortal words of Bob Dylan, every day above ground is a good day.
Very good.
I don't know why that came into my head. What is you learn? No, I just and you know what? Follow it. And as far as this, anybody that's got any kind of is creative, no matter what's going on, take it from me, just follow your dreams and work hard and don't let anybody tell you, take you off your course, and you'll probably get to where you want to go.
Thank you very much on behalf of our listeners for this interview.
Okay, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Have a good one.
Okay, you too. Bye.